distracting, Kathy.
I'll try to get rid of it, but I'm not real fast at stuff. So anyway, I did it as
because it looks very windy there. We might make sure you don't blow over.
Right. Okay, let's call advisory committee meeting to order at 6:33 p.m. on Wednesday, December 2nd. So pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Southborough Advisory Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and our parties with the right and a requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at www.southboroughtown.com. That's not right, southboroughmass.com. So I'm going to repeat what I just said. Town website at www.southboroughma.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner by finding the meeting at southboroughma.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Okay? So we're going to do this. We're not going to do the agenda in the order that is listed here. We're going to go straight to the Board of Health presentation. Let me see who's over here. So
Tim, did you have a question?
Go ahead, Tim.
You're on mute, or I can't hear you. Still can't hear you. No.
You want to chat? Okay, so we keep going.
Tim's muted.
Well, he wasn't though. We still couldn't hear him, so there's something wrong. Okay, so you brought in Mary Lou and
Paul, and I brought Nancy in as well.
Yeah, I'm here as well.
okay, good. So Mary Lou, we're going to try to do this in about 30 minutes. So let me introduce the issue. Everyone has seen your memo. So it has at least a vague idea of what's going on here. So everybody knows, does everybody know Mary Lou? Mary Lou is the chair of the Board of Health, the 3-person Board of Health, and has been for a while. Nancy Sacco is also on the board. She's a second member. And then Paul Pazinski, of course, is our long-term Director of Health at the Board of Health. So the reason we're talking to Nancy, Paul, and Mary Lou tonight is because they are looking for funding for fiscal year 21 to basically accomplish what they have proposed for fiscal year 22 6 months earlier. They are all working much longer hours than what they are supposed to be working. So they are asking to basically do 3 things. They'd like to see the admin position upgraded to full-time. They'd like to see the nurse position upgraded to full-time. And they'd like to see the Director of Health position upgraded to full-time, effective 1/1/21. Through December 31st, they have been operating with their current employees, plus they've had 2 part-time per diem nurses to help out. The funding for the 2 part-time per diem nurses is expected to be reimbursed by the CARES Act. So that's how they got funded. It's certainly not in their budget, but that's what is going to offset that. They won't have the CARES Act funding as of 1/1/21, at least as far as we know right now. That may change, but right now there is no funding for 1/1/21. So they have no way to upgrade these positions financially without help from advisory using the reserve fund. So the request is to do those 3 things as of 1/1/21 and use the reserve fund to fund them to get them through 6/30/21. Now, this is more complicated than just funding. So it's not necessarily something that is achievable because the way the town's finances work. So I talked to Mark Purple. I talked to Betsy Rosenblum. Can you bring Betsy over too, Jason?
I can. She has her hand up. I was going to wait for you to take a breath, but Betsy, I'm bringing you in.
So if advised, we're not going to vote tonight. So this is just to get the information, think about it, and then discuss it again next week and possibly take a vote next week. A reserve fund, as you know, has $180,000 in it. They are asking for about 120 to be able to
Thanks,
do
Suze.
3 things. I have no idea what that was.
That was Betsy.
Okay. Hello,
I
Betsy.
had little technical difficulties.
Okay. Wait.
Okay, I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, so the reason we're involved is because there's no way to fund this unless we help. It's not in the fiscal year 21 budget. So, but there's more to it than that. Even if we were to want to do this and approve it, there is no ability to do a couple of things that they want to do easily in the first 6 months of 2021. So let's take them one at a time. I'll start with the easy one. There is a position on the SAP to upgrade the part-time admin position to full-time. So that one's not hard. You could do that easily. There is no position on SAP for a full-time nurse. So that one is hard. There is no position on the SAP for a full-time health director.
Hey, Kathy, can you hear me now?
I can, Tim.
Okay, thank you.
It's not as easy as just funding them. There's got to be things done to actually allow this to happen too, besides what we can do. So keep that in mind too. So what Betsy and I talked about today is ways that they might be able to do what they want to do in a different way. SAP, as you know, is a warrant article. So every year at town meeting, any changes made to it are approved for the next fiscal year. So the first time they could get the full-time nurse, a full-time health director would be 7/1/21. And that was their plan all along. It says they have so much to do right now, so much going with COVID. They want to try to accelerate their plan that they had for 7/1/21 to make it effective 1/1/21. I don't want to get into all the details of Mr. Pazinski's contract because it's complicated as far as what he is. I'm sorry, Paul, to be talking about you. I know you listen to this, but there is a question as to whether he is a contract employee or he's on the SAP, and it's complicated. But what they might consider doing is, again, the admin position can be upgraded. That one's not hard. As far as the nurse goes, we don't know of any good way to upgrade the nurse to a full-time nurse. So they could continue to do the per diem nurses that they're doing now, maybe even add one more to it, and that could be funded. So they'd be basically what I call a 1099 employee or contract. They would not be employees of the town. So they'd be part-time per diem nurses like they are now. So they could continue that, and we could potentially fund that. As far as the full-time health director, what they might be able to do is do something similar to what is being done with Paul now. Paul is under an agreement where he's not contractual. He is not necessarily SAP. So they could possibly contract with another person to support Paul for the next 6 months and basically treat him in the same capacity, which would be, at least for now, a contract employee. When I say contract, I'm talking tax terms. I'm talking truly an independent contractor that gets a 1099 and would not be an employee. So that's kind of the issues that are going to arise as far as trying to solve this. So it's much more than just trying to find the funding for it. So I'm going to stop there and ask, where did Mary Lou go? Are you still there?
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Okay. So Mary Lou, with that intro, feel free to correct anything I said wrong, add anything to it you want to. You might want to explain, what you think the town should be doing anyway, so that we can try to make a good decision here.
Sure. So I think you had a chance to review the documents that we prepared in the thinking that really Southborough Board of Health has really been operational really since I started. I've been with the board for many years on minimal funds. We're doing the core basic minimal. We used to have a full-time health director that's no longer full-time. We used to have a full-time nurse that's no longer. So over the years, it's come down to sort of bare bones, and COVID has sort of put a shining light on the gaps that we already have. as well as the state has reviewed, as this document says, Massachusetts is unique than all the other states in the nation in that we have 351 cities and towns that are all responsible for their own public health. And the state realizes that and trying to figure out ways to support it. And that was the purpose to really designing this blueprint to help guide. At the same time, we're cutting down services over the past year and past 10 years and staffing. The responsibilities of public health have grown. We have a lot more communicable diseases, tick-borne illnesses, a whole host of things that I could talk about. And so the reason we're coming to you is because as we met and as you know, we had to develop our 2021 budget before COVID really hit. And then in our discussions, like, okay, can we make it until July of 21 to get through this? And frankly, all the staff that are working above all of their hours, above their normal work, and we're all at a breaking point. I'm committing. I have a full-time job, but this is consuming at least 10 or more hours of my time a week, and I know a lot of other people are putting in extra than their paid time as well, and we can't sustain this for 8 more months, 9 more months. So what we'd like to see happen is we can hire a full-time health director. As everybody knows, Paul's retired a couple times, and right now he's half-time. He's trying to fill those holes, but staying up to date on the new technologies, on the new requirements the state is now putting out is not something that Paul wants to or can do. And so if we're able to hire a health director now, Paul can stay on to really help mentor this person. Paul has an enormous amount of knowledge and experience that would be wonderful to pass on to a new health director that can really bring Southborough into the 21st century and really look at the core public health services that we should be providing, that our residents should be able to rely on. And Paul could help guide that. The nurse position is a full-time nurse in addition to a half-time nurse that we already have. So this is not just bringing it at the current half-time to full-time. Emily Amico, who's our public health nurse that a lot of you may have met now, she jumped in and it was hit with COVID within a month after she started doing public health work, and she has been working her tail off. And she has 3 school-age kids trying to remote teach them at the same time. And it's not sustainable. And it's like, we need help. We really need help. And we want to provide the best service to the residents of Southborough as we possibly can. And it's just not possible right now.
Okay, so one more detail, just to be clear before people start asking questions. As of 7/1 for your fiscal year 22 budget, I misunderstood. So you want 1.5 nurses.
Correct.
Okay. You want a full-time director, 1.5 nurses, and then the full-time admin.
Correct.
Okay.
That's what we feel that is the staffing structure that can support the current COVID, the current issues, as well as it's not just going to help us get through COVID. This is something that Southborough needs going forward, and to move us to a potential certification and everything that's needed to become a really good functioning Board of Health. I wanted to put out, there are statutes within the public health boards that allow I pulled out some of them, and it might require some legal looking at, but in the state regulations, it says boards of health may appoint agents or directors of public health to act for them in the case of emergency. And if they cannot conveniently assemble, blah, 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 it goes to language. But there is language in our statutes that may allow us to do this, to fill the gap until, the structure that we need from a personnel perspective.
Okay, Betsy, before we go to the other advisory members to ask questions, let's let everyone know what we talked about today as far as the language in the SAP that the overarching language that basically allows part-time people to be converted to full-time people without anything else being done in the SAP.
Do you want me to speak, Kathy?
I do.
Yeah, so in my discussions with both Mary Lou on Monday and Kathy today, I pointed out that there's a section in the SAP, section 13. I'm going into my 4th year on the board. I was appointed in September 2017. I've never seen this used, and it's called Transitions Between Full-Time and Part-Time. And basically what it says is, all that's required for a part-time employee to transition to full-time status and vice versa, full-time to part-time, is for the employee to work the appropriate hours. So for a part-time, it would be more than 20. For a full-time, less than 20. For 3 weeks with the department head approval. And that kind of flies in the face of how the SAP has been administered since I've been on the board. And that's that if you want to add a position that's not in the SAP, you have to put it before town meeting. So I don't really understand what section 13 is doing here. It was here before I joined the board. I've not seen it used. I looked at it today after I talked to Kathy. I could interpret it as maybe some kind of temporary assignment. So say you've got a part-time employee, let's say Emily, the nurse, to be eligible for full-time status. Maybe that just means that we pay her for more than 20 hours a week, and full-time status could imply benefits, because right now part-time SAP employees are not benefited. The benefits in section 11 of the SAP are for full-time employees only. So maybe we're not talking about adding a position. It could be interpreted, Kathy, as full-time status, meaning benefits, and you'll get paid for your hours. But nobody's interpreted it to my knowledge, and I've not dealt with it before. So I just wanted to let folks know that it was there.
And, you know, the current nurse does not want to work full-time anyway, so it's not really a good option for the nurse. She doesn't want to work full-time. She can't work full-time.
Yep.
So, you know, we're still talking about trying to find a way to add nursing hours without asking her to do something she's going to say no to because she doesn't want to do it.
And Kathy, I would just add, I live in fiscal years. We are currently under an SAP that will govern us until June 30th, 2021. If there is a creative solution to be had to what I call the short-term needs of the Board of Health and the town, by which I mean today through June 30th, you would be outside the SAP or under an SAP that was approved at town meeting back in the summer. We can't add to that SAP. So if you want to come before the personnel board to argue for the future needs of the department, and that is something, Mary Lou, we're seeing you on next Wednesday, that would be to talk about adding positions for the FY22 SAP. And the window where the board entertains requests for next year's SAP are the months of December and January. Then we wrap our recommendations in February for the warrant to go to bed. Assuming they're still under the, as far as I know, the latest I heard from Mark Purple is we're still moving forward with a February deadline for the warrant because we are assuming we're going to have a March town meeting and nobody has extended our deadline. So we're happy to entertain your request to include positions in the SAP. But if you're talking about something in the short term for the next 7 months, you are beyond the SAP.
Okay, so I never know if people see people the same way I see them. So I'm just going to start and go from left to right. So Jason?
So I guess my questions before I get into the financial aspects of it, because I think there's some quick fixes and there's some not so quick fixes. One, why is it December 2020 and we're hearing about this? Because some of this seems non-COVID related, right? And if I think about like the public health nurse versus the full-time director, like have there been prior conversations, and maybe I missed them as the newest member of advisory, but I don't remember them being talked about at least. There have been conversations about the transition of Paul's role to full-time that have been shot down and this is coming back up, or like I'm a little confused as to the timing because that doesn't seem fully COVID related based on this, versus I get the full-time public health nurse definitely has a tie to COVID.
So I'll try to answer that, Beth, and I don't know if you want to hear from Paul, but so Paul is half-time, and you're right, it's not all COVID. We would have been, even without COVID, not even in the picture, we would have been talking about a full-time health director, because over the last several years, we've supplemented some of the work that needs to be done by a sanitary inspector, by contracting hours as we've needed to. It's been piecemeal and patchwork, I guess, without a budget that really can fund the department the way it needs to be funded. But COVID just accelerated it. There's also a building boom going on. Just doing the soil evaluations and Title V's and all of those things, as well as a couple other urgent kind of issues that have arisen. Those are all basic Board of Health things that we would have a hard time keeping up with without COVID. So you're right, it's not just COVID, but COVID's what has really escalated this. Without COVID, we would probably be going through the normal process, be looking at approval of the new budget and moving forward. But it's COVID that's put the crisis to this point that we're coming to you.
And if I may add something, I feel like in the past, when we've struggled with our budget, I've never thought we've had enough staff, but it's almost like unless there's a pandemic or something catastrophic going on, people don't really like to fund the Board of Health. So then when things do happen, that leaves us scrambling and just unable to really function the way we should be functioning.
Got it. So I guess my next broad question before I go into a few specifics is there any reason why we're not considering regionalizing these services?
So yes, that's a really good question. And the structure right now doesn't allow us. The state is working on changing regulations and structures that allow for regionalization, and that may happen in the next year or two. So maybe we could regionalize some of our inspectional services. We could regionalize some of our epidemiology services. We could regionalize some of the things that we're not even doing to make a more robust health department. But from a perspective of someone to oversee the public health of Southborough, we need someone who's front and center, current with all of the information that needs to be, and can respond to public ongoing. And maybe we can supplement the other things with regionalization, but regionalizing a health director, Southborough has enough work for and more.
So I don't necessarily understand that comment, because the Neshoba Valley, I'm going to get the Neshoba Associated Boards of Health, which is located just north of here, includes the towns of Ashburn, Ashby, Ayr, Berlin, Bolton, Boxborough, Dunstable, Groton, Harvard, Lancaster, Littleton, Lunenburg, Pepperell, Shirley, Stowe, and Townsend. Those are a lot of towns.
Correct.
They're obviously all geographically connected, but a lot of them have residential populations and demographics very similar to Southborough, and some are obviously more spread out. Right, we're a little more compact from a geography perspective, but I would challenge you, both short-term and long-term, that the answer is not just hiring, but finding ways to take advantage of expertise like you've had with Mr. Brzezinski, your sanitary inspector, et cetera, and get the benefit of that across multiple towns. And I don't know that that person physically has to be sitting in town 40 hours a week to get some of those benefits.
Have you asked the Neshoba Valley how they're doing through this pandemic? Are they struggling?
I
Are they
haven't, 'cause I just
meeting
got this,
their-
I just got your memo this morning. But my first reaction was on their web, I'm literally sitting here looking at their website right now. It says your community, your choice since 1931.
Correct. And the requirements of health departments since 1931 have changed dramatically. And having shared services for some services makes a lot of sense. I don't think anyone's going to argue that. But for those cities and towns that are part of that collaborative, all of their public health is not conducted through that collaborative. They have their own health department that manages some of the services, and that collaborative serves some of the other services that they have. I can list you the requirements. I mean, I didn't include it on this, of what a health department is expected to do. And this is kind of what's happened over the years, is that people don't necessarily see public health as a critical service because we're not always visible. We're doing the behind the scenes. We're making sure people don't get sick. We're making sure that outside of the basic inspectional services, that food is safe and parks are safe and things are safe for people to conduct business. A lot of the things that we do are behind the scenes, and you don't see that unless there's a problem. And so that's how really health departments have lost a lot of funding over the years, because we're not visible. The residents don't know all of the work that's being done and all of the work that needs to get done and is not being done right now.
So Mary Lou, I agree with you. But tonight, so Jason, I think that looking at the regionalization is something we definitely should look at. But for tonight, we should probably keep our focus on what to do short term.
So
that's why they're here is, can we get
Okay.
resource transfer?
So I'm just saying, like, if we had a vote tonight,
I agree.
I don't think I could. I think here would be the reasons I would just vote no on the memo as is. And I completely understand the predicament you're in. But one, I think we're going to get more CARES Act funding. We like, it's just a matter of how much and when it comes and when something can happen in Washington. So obviously this would all be subject to not getting an extension of the CARES Act in some way, shape, or form, especially on the public health nurse side of needing the additional bandwidth. But I would think in the short term, your IT need of 10,000 is easily solved. Go talk to the town administrator and whoever's substituting in on the IT, and get this equipment to support what you're currently doing with your per diem nurses, et cetera. And if it just ends up transitioning from a per diem nurse to a full-time employee down the road, if that's the way the town goes, then so be it. But that funding's available now without draining the town's reserve fund. And then my second is on the administrative assistant. Have there been any discussions, because we have a lot of administrative assistants in town, and we still have employees that are not fully functional in their departments because buildings are closed or have reduced activities, et cetera, like that we could have someone assist at least to get us to 7-1 to allow for the right vetting of this, i.e. take the responsibilities that, and you share with assessors right now, is that correct?
We should.
Yes.
Yeah, so is there someone that can either step in Mr. Sabelli's office short-term and allow your admin to expand to full-time for your department? And or is there backfilling that can happen in some way, shape, or form? I'm not saying it's necessarily backfilling for you, but it may be backfilling an assessor. So has that conversation occurred?
So Mary Lou, I've got to call into Paul Sabelli. He didn't call me back today to see what he thought about this person. About,
He has been, he has been more than accommodating, letting, our administrative person often work hours like that should be on assessors, knowing that it's all the town, we're trying to make it work. He's been more than flexible in trying to help us, and we're just, it's not working. That's been going on all summer.
it's not working because you don't have her full-time, even though you've got her extra hours, you still need. So there is, I want to get to everybody else, but there is a shuffling going on right now of admins, which I was going to get to in the chair's report. So I'll give you more details shortly. So I do think that there are hours available to help you for the admin side of it. So I think that's the easier of your three problems to solve.
Right.
Okay, so Andrew Pfaff, sorry, Andrew P.
Which one?
Andrew P.
Yeah, so I mean, I certainly understand the crisis we're in. My concern would be, again, kind of with Jason, is this, a lot of this seems more of a strategic move versus a COVID response. I would prefer to see more per diem spend than full-time. I also don't think the benefits is included in the cost here.
It's not.
And I also don't see the other half-time nurse in here.
So if we could keep, what I'm trying to do is make sure you guys have all the information you need so we can discuss it at next meeting. We're not going to vote tonight.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about it on the 9th. So if we could keep the questions to making sure you really understand everything they're trying to do, that's what I'm trying to get out at this point so that we can go on to.
Yeah. So Kathy, if I look at the, excuse me, it's a reserve fund transfer 119.
Yep.
We have the public health director for 50, which is on a salary of 91K. So I'm assuming that includes the benefits for half of the year. That get us up to 50. And then the public health nurse is 70. And then the request is worth 40. So I'm assuming that extra 5K is for benefits.
Mary Lou, do you think you include the benefits in these numbers? I didn't think you did.
I don't believe they are.
Okay. So I think we might be.
And really the, normal process of really trying to vet out what is a salary that's going to attract someone that's qualified to fill this position. I've been back and forth with national, with state offices. There are now 6 public health director jobs listed right now for hire. And those range from 75,000 to 110,000 for that full-time position. The role of all public health departments across the state are feeling the same thing, and some have the ability to get it out right away. But if we don't have a competitive salary, we're not going to be able to find someone, because these people, I envision, if we have a salary that's competitive, Massachusetts is unique enough. If someone really likes this field and wants to be in it, they will move here for this position.
So we can get the amount sorted out as far as get the benefits, so we know what the total is, because that would have to be considered too.
Yeah,
Right.
Kathy, my only concern is that the 50 doesn't foot with what the 394 fiscal year 22 budget number is. So that's including 90. So I'm saying goose up your budget with the 100 if that's the number. So we're
Right.
We're correct.
No, I agree that the budget, the 22 budget that's not finalized yet.
Yeah.
So,
I'm just trying to explain that discrepancy. Not
Yeah,
that which
exactly.
one's better.
No.
I
Thank
see
you. Yeah.
Yep.
That's correct.
And then I just didn't see that extra half of a public health nurse in the numbers. And then Kathy, we're going to need,
So
we would need the
Andrew,
other.
are you talking about the proposed fiscal year 22 budget? Are you talking about the memo where they're asking?
I'm talking about the memo first, not matching the budget. So if it's an acceleration of the fiscal year 22 ask,
It doesn't seem to match. Okay, so
It
we'll
doesn't
get the
seem-
numbers straightened out as far
Yeah.
as that piece of it goes.
and then, there's that other half a resource, which isn't in either. And also we need a separate reserve fund for Brian's budget for benefits, because that's not in here. right? I want to make sure if we're going to.
No, I agree that you got to consider the total cost, regardless of which budget it's coming out of, if we decide to do this. Okay, Tim?
Can you hear me, Kathy?
I can hear you.
I don't have any additional questions. I don't know, Kathy, I will defer to you. I don't know that we need to wait to vote. I think we have the information in front of us, but again, it's up to you.
I just don't think we can vote because I don't think what they propose works, Tim. We don't have the ability to add a full-time nurse unless we do this section 13 thing where it looks like maybe we could go from part-time to full-time, but the current part-time nurse doesn't want to be full-time. So I don't know how we do that one.
Well, I think the vote in turn would possibly be no. And then people understand that and they're able to pursue alternatives, ideally with our support. But the idea of stringing this along in the future when it may or may not have support, I don't know that that's the best way to proceed.
I'd still like to wait the week to really think through this.
Okay.
It's not a month, it's a week, right? Before we really take a official vote. So we've got a chance to think about it and discuss it full, and then we vote as far as whether we think the reserve fund is appropriate for this. Okay, so Andrew D.
Yes. Mary Lou, I have a very basic question. Can you just help me understand what each of the positions does? And also in terms of its connection to COVID, are the people that we're hiring, are those people doing things like, distributing vaccines or contact tracing or diagnosing and treating patients, things like that? I just don't have enough of a basic sense of what the people do. And that's really just because I'm fairly new to the advisory committee.
Okay, sure. And I'd be happy to share with you the role that a health director should be doing. We have a job posting. I'd love to share with you a draft job posting, all of the responsibilities that go into a health director. We need a health director that is able to oversee nursing and community health programs and inspectional services. Paul doesn't have that background to do that. So, and I do want to just say to everybody that if we can't find a solution soon, we're going to start losing people. I'm afraid we're going to end up with really no board members and then no staff at all, because the staff are so burned out at this point. I don't know what the solution is. And so I just want to put that out there. And being able to increase hours for the nurse or the director, neither one of those are an option. So that isn't going to help either. The nursing position that we have that right now, Emily is half-time, hired half-time, wants to work half-time. She's been working close to 40 hours. We've spent almost a little over $50,000 so far since April to support the work that's being done. And that's been funded through CARES Fund and FEMA funding. So that's just money that's, been spent on these people working like overtime. Emily's working full-time most weeks. And so nursing wise, it's not just the immunization. We had to put in an application this week for vaccine distribution. Is Southborough going to get any vaccines? We have to apply for that. We have to be approved for that. And then we have staff to organize it, to distribute the vaccine, to manage the paperwork that goes along with that, which is a lot of paperwork to process that.
I'd like to interject I'm
Sure.
sorry to cut you off.
Sure.
Is it possible to put that kind of a proposal together? Very specific targeted effort. Hey, we need to get these vaccines out over the next 3 months or what have you. These are the costs that whether it's labor or other, these are the costs associated with it. It's going to be X amount. Bring that before advisory, and that's something that we might be able to act on very quickly.
Well, I don't think we have any idea when these vaccines are going to be available. And they're going to go to, I'm an ICU nurse, so no one's more spent with COVID than I am. So I admittedly don't have enough time to contribute to the Board of Health right now. So I appreciate Mary Lou picking up the slack because, I'm I'm living it. And I don't know if you guys realize how serious it is, but if you have to deal with it every day, you might feel a little differently. And from the last I heard, I don't think it'll probably be end of spring before we can give it out to the public. I mean, I think they're going to try to get healthcare and first responders first. So I don't think it's going to be March before we'd be having any kind of mass immunization, but it's coming and we're going to need people to run that. And just doing the flu clinic with Emily, she looked like she was ready to quit any day. She's so fried. She's so fried. Mary Lou is right. We're going to end up with nobody.
Okay,
So
Nancy, let me
that's-
just interrupt here. Mary Lou, to the extent you're willing to share with us, can you tell us what you think is going to happen to the 3-member board in the next, say, 6 months?
So Dan O'Rourke is decided he's not, his personal and work life is too challenging. He will not be going up for re-election. I will be moving out of town in the spring. So I will be going off the board in the spring, as soon as our house is sold. Nancy, as she said, her work and personal life is really,
I honestly wasn't going to run last spring because I've been working a lot of extra jobs lately, but I didn't want to leave the board in the middle of a pandemic. But honestly, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be staying. I'll see it through because as long as I can, but I'm stretched very thin as well.
Okay, so I just want to make sure everybody knew that fact too. Andrew D., are you through with your questions? Do you have other ones? Do you think you know enough?
Well,
about-
I just want to say, obviously, I mean, we're very sympathetic to everything that you're going through and want to find a way to help. And we feel we have a responsibility to, understand this as much as we can. And I just, because I am new to the advisory committee, I'm just trying to understand how much of what you do is how it coordinates with what happens from private providers and the state and things like that. And I know it's such a fluid situation, it may be difficult to even answer.
well, no, to your question, if you want to give me a call at some point.
Okay.
And I'll be happy.
Why
to
don't
talk
you do
about-
that, Andrew? And then between now and next Wednesday, so that we're ready to truly tackle this one way or another. But Nancy, you're right. We don't understand what you're probably going through. I think we try and we think maybe
No,
sometimes.
I know, and I'm not looking for
You know,
sympathy.
it's like a
I'm
lot of
really
things, unless you do
But
it
if I
yourself,
see
you
the
don't-
money go for something frivolous in town, I'll be heartbroken. I really will. I don't think we've ever been looked at for what we're really worth, ever. Because like Mary Lou said, no one really appreciates us until the proverbial poop hits the fan. And I'm sorry if that sounds crass, but that's just the way it's always been. If the bird flu's coming or something. I've been doing this now for 15 years and it's, everybody wants us when there's something bad going on, and then we're sort of forgotten when things are back to normal, and it wears on you after a while, which is, I think why you're going to probably see a turnover in board members, and probably I think we're going to lose our nurse. I would not be shocked. And I wouldn't blame her.
And there's also, we talk about what, public health does. A big part of public health is emergency preparedness. And our emergency preparedness documents are not up to date. We don't have someone, sort of overseeing that. That should be a public health director that has that background to do that. We don't have that right now. If we had a bad tornado or a hurricane, public health should be front and center dealing with that. We don't have a plan in place for all that. And I could go on, but I'm just, I think having a better understanding about what local public health does and what should do for the town would really weigh in your decisions.
And I think we need some continuity. Like, we can't have all these piecemeal people working. We can't have 17 different per diems do it. Like, we need some continuity. We need somebody running the show.
You're
And it
making
can't
my
be
case for
10
regionalization.
hours, he's 5 hours.
No.
Jason, we can't
it's
get
not.
regionalized by January 1st. So I agree that we definitely should look at this long term,
But
that's not gonna
but Kathy, I'm really sympathetic to what they're going through, but I think do we really think that the governor is just going to deliver vaccines to the town of Boxborough, to Southborough, and say, you have to figure out how to deal with this?
No, we won't get any vaccine. So if we don't have this in place, we won't get any. Southborough will not get any vaccines to the local health department. If we don't have systems in place, we don't have people to run it. Vaccines will go to hospitals and will go to CVS and Walgreens, and we won't have the ability to, vaccinate people. It just won't happen. So there are cities and towns that won't get any vaccine. Do we want to be one of them?
Is that rhetorical? Mr. Rooney, you want to chime in here?
Yeah, very briefly. Thank you, Mary Lou and Nancy. I have a couple questions, Kathy, that I'd like to have answered before next time. One is, and I think Ms. Rosenblum set the theme of my questions. My first question is this inappropriate, or are these appropriate items for a reserve transfer? Number one. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know, Kathy, if you do, or if town council does, but that's one of the questions I have. Second question, and it really relates to the first question, is that in essence, it appears as if we are being asked, and please correct me if I'm wrong, we are being asked to create 2 new SAP funded positions, at least for a period of 7 months until town meeting decides or takes up the issue. And I don't know if that's something we can do legally.
We can't. Advisory cannot create these positions. This is, SAP, whatever. All we're being asked to do is provide the funds to do it if we can find the way to structurally add these positions. So no, it's certainly not our purview to add positions. That's why Betsy's here tonight.
Yeah, and I just didn't know, can we fund a position that doesn't exist?
Well, what would be the purpose of that? So don't we need the position first, and then
Right.
It seems like that would be a little bit.
And I think what we were asking and what we thought, is there a way to contract a person till that can happen? And I think the statute in public health law does allow us to do that. So that's what I think we're proposing. We know we can't create an SAP position, and we know we can't, that doesn't happen overnight. So can we contract?
Mary Lou, Betsy and I think that probably you can do what you just said. That'd be the way to do this. John, in answer to your first question, reserve fund transfers, this sounds like a reserve fund transfer to me as far as meeting requirements. There are, unusual, emergency, not expected. And granted, we did know about COVID at the summer town meeting, but still, given the other things that we approve of for reserve fund, I think this fits squarely into that. So I'm not worried about this meeting the definition, and we don't need to ask Aldo.
Okay, and what is the consequence of having no members of an elected Board of Health? What happens then?
Sounds like a
What is
problem.
the concept? I didn't hear the question.
Yeah.
What if Nancy says, I'm not doing it either, I'm not gonna be the one person board here. So there's no board. Mary Lou, you move, Dan doesn't re-up.
Dan's
and-
up for re-election, so there'd be
So
one.
he just doesn't run. And
Right,
then Nancy says, I'm not doing this, enough.
right.
And what happens then? Does it default to another department, or who steps up to fill that vacuum?
I don't know, Paul, do you have any idea? Could you speak to this? Usually you are well-versed on all of that.
Yes. If there is one vacant position on the Board of Health and there's no election in the next week, the Board of Health, the 2 remaining members meet with the selectmen. And so the 2 plus the 5 would vote jointly to fill that void. If there is no Board of Health, then the selectmen would open up the entire positions, all 3, look for people who may be interested, and then decide to appoint. So it'd be just the 5 Board of Selectmen would appoint until the next nearest election.
Thank you, Paul.
That's very helpful. Anything else, Mr. Rooney?
That's it, Kathy. Thank you.
Okay, Judy? And you're muted, Judy, too. So Judy, I'm going to assume that's no. And if it's not, come on in when you can. Paul, is there anything you want to say before we close this part?
Just one other thing. I'd love to spend some time with you, the advisory committee, finance advisory committee, and especially Jason, to maybe go into this, dive into this whole problem, this whole issue of regionalism. I've been in the business of public health and environmental pollution control and so forth, working for 14 years as the assistant director for the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission. And if there's anybody who would advocate for regionalism, it's me. I've always professed to have an interest in it, but it's kind of a Gordian knot. It's really a difficult situation. And the Neshoba Board of Health is only one of several regional bodies within the state. There's about 7 different ones, and they're all different. There's the Barnstable County, which is a regional health district, Barnstable County Health District. They're all different, but they all got formed because of usually some sort of a situation where, in the case of Neshoba, years ago, none of the boards except for one board had a staff. And so it just so happened that they would meet together, the boards of health would meet together in Neshoba and talk about what can we do, because we need an agent to go out and witness soil testing. We need to do some inspections and so forth. And 2 of them got together, and 3 of them, and then 4. And before you know it, they decided to, under a particular statute, to form a regional district, the Neshoba Board of Health District. But like Mary Lou said, each town still has their own Board of Health, and some of them now have their own staff on their own local Board of Health. Now, Southborough has been involved with several regional efforts, starting with the tobacco control program. We've always had a regional, that's just one function, and we've talked about other functions with the same group of towns. We've added towns along the way since 1994. Some have lobbed off because of the funding, but a lot of it was basically put together because of the state saying, we're going to give you the funds. And that's exactly, if you look at any of the regional functional districts across the state, whether they be regional schools, regional sewer districts, like the Upper Blackstone Water Pollution Abatement District, Westboro, Shrewsbury, Webster, Dudley, they were all formed because there was money available. Huge amounts of money were available if they regionalized. I worked for the state of Connecticut for a short while. Connecticut has a lot of regional health districts because what they do is, if you have one function like restaurant inspections or housing code violation inspections or swimming pool, you get an extra $1 per capita. So every time you regionalize with another community, whether it be a city or town in Connecticut, the state funds it. Now in Massachusetts, there is no such thing. The only thing we've gotten money for is with the tobacco control program. But I could go on and on and on, and I don't want to take a lot of your time, but I would love to spend some time, especially with Jason, to give him a little bit more of the background of how regionalism forms and why it takes so long sometimes to form a regional district, and the pitfalls and some of the problems we're trying to coordinate with another community.
Paul, we definitely will be talking to you about the regionalization, so don't worry about that.
Hey, Kathy, can I ask Mary Lou one more question I forgot to. Mary Lou, you indicated that, what if Southborough doesn't get any vaccines? Is there a particular population within Southborough that would seek the vaccine from our Board of Health as opposed to going to, their provider or, CVS or Walgreens? What would be I don't know if it could be the volume, but the type of population, if there is one, that would go to the Board of Health?
So it would be similar to the flu clinics. Why do we do flu clinics?
Okay.
We do flu clinics because it's predominantly seniors, people who have a challenging time. Providers aren't going to get these vaccines. So to say you just go to your local provider and get it, that's not going to happen for at least in the immediate, close to immediate time. And so the reason we do flu clinics is the same reason, is to help out our seniors and to help out our disabled and help out the people that aren't able to get to those locations to get.
Okay, that's what I thought. And thank you, Mary Lou. I just wanted to make sure that was my thinking was correct.
Betsy?
Yeah, so I would just ask, to the extent that Paul or Mary Lou or Nancy has discussions with Jason or other members of advisory, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea for me to listen in, because you all are talking about a short-term solution, but my board is going to be sitting next Wednesday and again in January and hearing this request for the SAP. It's now in the next 2 months. I'm told we're going to wrap the warrant in February. So all the issues that you all are exploring will be very relevant to what my board is going to be talking about next week and when we wrap up the SAP. So I don't want Mary Lou to have to keep coming to talk to me and talking to you, because it's basically the same ground. All the sorts of things that advisory is asking are the things my board is going to be asking. Because under the SAP, we have a mission to serve employees and taxpayers. So Personnel Board asks similar questions to the questions that you're asking. So for efficiency's sake, keep me in the loop on what you all are discussing.
Okay. So Mary Lou, Nancy, and Paul, we really appreciate you coming tonight. And thank you for what you're doing. You're right. We don't work in your shoes, and so we shouldn't act like we do. So we will, Mary Lou, we will take this up again next Wednesday, and we will keep you guys posted.
All
Thank
right.
you very much.
Thank you for the time.
you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Good night.
All right. That was depressing. Okay, let's start with, let's see who's over here. Is Sarah here? There she is. So can you bring Sarah Castle over? And let's see. And I think that's that.
I assume Sue is really Paul, or Paul is really
Yes,
Sue.
that's Sue. And then this may be Marguerite here. The
No, that's
detail. I don't know. Who,
the email address.
so I don't know.
Can Sarah
Marguerite-
confirm that before I bring her over?
Sarah, do you know if Marguerite's email is margace@aol.com?
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Yes,
Okay.
that is.
Yeah, so can you bring her over too? And I just want to say one more thing before we get started with Youth and Family Services, in case Ryan Donovan doesn't want to be here. We're not doing library tonight, so I'm not sure how they got confused. We do the library on the 16th.
No, I told him he's not coming.
Okay, all right, well, he's here, so I just want to
Oh,
make sure.
well,
He's
just
here.
kidding.
He's here just because he wants to be here, not because we're.
Yeah.
All right, hey, ladies.
Hello.
All right, so I see Sue, I see Sarah, and I see Marguerite. Okay, so just by way of a little bit of background, does everyone on advisory understand that Youth and Family Services, like many other departments, does have its own independent board? And I'm not talking about the Friends group that is separate, that supports them from the outside, but they have a board. Sue is on that board. Marguerite is on that board. So that's why they're here with us tonight. And of course, Sarah's the director. All right. Okay, so let's get started with your budget. So Jason, I'm going to start screen sharing some things here.
You should be able to screen share, Kathy.
Kathy, before we get to that, could I just ask Sarah to very briefly tell us how her department has been impacted as a result of this pandemic? If she could do it maybe in 3 or 4 sentences, just so I have an understanding.
Sure, I will try to be as concise as possible. I will say there has been absolutely no shortage of work in our department. And we were fortunate enough to have a fairly seamless transition in March from in-person services to online or telephone services. We are still needing to confer with people in person because we're heavily involved in some applications for social services and public assistance programs. And so we have to collect a lot of documents from people, but by and large, all of our appointments, given the nature of the work that we do and that we have to sit in close quarters with people for long periods of time. Everything we're doing is online or by phone. But that has fortunately worked out very well. There's been some challenges, but so beyond that, I would say we're quite busy. And the scope of what we've been working on has expanded over the last year. I wouldn't say so dramatically. It was work that we were already doing, but the need-based services that we offer, in particular, has had a lot of business.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yep.
Sorry.
John, let me just interject something here. I'm part of the Friends group that supports this department, and there's clearly been an uptick in financial need from COVID that the Friends has been asked to basically fund. So that's one thing that certainly has happened. Okay, everybody ready to start with their proposed budget? So Sarah, everybody is doing, all the departments are doing a great job with their memos, by the way. I know a couple of you were skeptical, but these memos are well written. I got Sarah's today, so I will upload that to the OneDrive folder later on tonight, and we're going to talk about
My
OneDrive.
apologies for it coming.
It's fine. You guys were the first one to come, so it's perfectly fine. It's well written too. So I'm just going to introduce the big picture, and then Sarah, can you take over as far as details go?
Sure.
Okay, so they are asking for a 5.34% overall year-over-year increase from last year. It really is basically one thing besides the normal salary increases, which is a contract with a place called Interface, which is part of a local college. So long story short, they actually have already entered into the contract with Interface for calendar year 2021. It's being funded completely by the Friends Group through a grant received from the Southborough Community Foundation. So what they're looking for in this budget is the funding for the second year, which has been guaranteed not to exceed $20,000. It may be less, but they said it won't exceed 20. So I think we really ought to spend our time focused on that because that is the biggest part of the increase from year over year. And then Sarah, if you can explain why the salaries are up, more than just the cost of living that you've been told to use, that would be helpful too.
The salary increase, I think it's all just a 2.5% increase for eligible SAP employees. The reason it looks a little bit more is because this year we had the approval to add an administrative assistant for FY21, but the position didn't start until October 1st. So we're funding this position for the entire year, and that's why there's that additional increase in salaries. But otherwise, it's just a 2.5% increase. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, the really we're just looking for the additional funds for interface referral services. And the model that our department is trying to move towards is, I'll just briefly give you a history that since my time in the department, when I started out here, our department operated much like a private practice in the sense that we were providing counseling services to individuals, sometimes to family members, but mostly individuals. And over time, it wasn't until 2016 that I took over as director in the department. But over time, we've tried to move away from providing so much direct service to residents as it's not sustainable for us, but rather to to be a hub of resource and referral to start. That is a service we're currently providing. And what I'll say, you might be wondering, well, why are you asking for funding for a contract to contract those services out? So mental health counseling specifically as a service is very challenging to find providers for. It requires, the process on our end is to look at several different databases of providers, many of which do not match, and to account for every single request that comes in, upwards of 10 different variables, whether that's type of therapy, location, male, female, time of day, so on and so forth. And so we then take all of our names and we start calling. And it's very, very difficult to get people to call us back. Sometimes the databases are completely out of date. We've had providers that we've called that are listed as taking new clients who have passed away and who are not practicing anymore. It's just incredibly time consuming. And what happens in the meantime is that we have residents who are in critical need of support who are not getting it. And so we try for 3 to 4 weeks to find providers for residents as our first line of action with supporting their mental health. And what ends up happening is that the staff in our department start working with these individuals in the meantime, because if you have a child who is experiencing suicidal ideation, we can't afford to wait a month or further beyond for a provider to become available. They need support now. So our staff takes on meeting with this individual, and we, then we therefore are not moving towards a model of becoming a resource and referral support network, but rather are right back where we were with seeing every individual that comes through our door. So in particular, mental health services, we still do a lot of resource and referral support for things like public assistance programs. I mentioned at the beginning that our need-based services are very busy right now. So that's a lot of where our resource and referral support is focused. But what Interface does is it has a network of staff dedicated to specific communities that are subscribed to this service. And all that they do, and I don't mean to minimize it, but I mean to highlight the fact that even an entire team of people is only providing referral support for mental health counseling, and that's all they dedicate their time to. But they take all of these variables, and in a 2-week turnaround time, they provide a short list for that resident and also help them get started with scheduling their first appointment. The other thing that Interface will do is that they'll continue to work with a resident until they find a good match. So it's not just one and done. A resident can call Interface as many times as they'd like to. They don't need to go through our department, although we will be the point of the community liaison for Southborough and Interface. But a resident could call Interface all on their own and get help that they need. Schools can actually use this service. Other town departments can. So it's a very, very beneficial program for the town as a whole. And Southborough happens to be one community that does not have a contract with Interface, while many others around us have had it for many years and have had a lot of success with it and found it to be very helpful. So, so I've done a lot of research on how it's been going in other communities. And I will say right now, Interface happens to be incredibly busy with trying to help people find mental health professionals and mental health support.
Okay, so John, it's 15 to 8, so why don't we start with you?
Kathy, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
I also misspoke, so let me just correct what I said. I'm surprised someone didn't correct me. So can everybody see my screen with the budget on it?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so I see where my cursor is. Can you see the cursor? I'm moving it so you can see it. See it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, so their proposed budget is 12.67% more than their budget for fiscal year 21. So I said 5.34. That's the salaries going up. So the whole thing is 12.67, which is a combination of basically salaries and this contract being added for the first time into the budget. And I just want to make sure everybody knows how to do this as we all get used to using ClickUp. So again, watch my cursor. Anytime you're on a line, and remember, you expand things by over here, hitting the plus, and you'll see all the details. You hit the minus, it folds it back up. So all your details are received by hitting the plus sign over to the left. But once you go over to the right, and you got to scroll all the way over, if you start seeing green in a line, that means that something is attached. And that's where you get your details. So if you want to see the salaries, I did it a minute ago. So you just hit this, click on that, and you see the details of salaries. Now, we don't have last year's salaries in here, so that doesn't do any good, but next year you will. So there's your 4 full-time ladies that work for Youth and Family Services. This is what their base salary is. All right. Then, if you keep going down, if you hit here, or if you click here, you're going to see the detail of what's going into the big increase. So there's your interface contract there. Okay, then next to it, or excuse me, the paperclip, means that the department has attached something they want you to see. So this is the memo that Sarah wrote about the interface contract. So you can get more detail there. So again, we're not voting anything tonight. We're just trying to hear everybody out. As everybody's going to see in a minute, the budget right now is way too high. So things, everybody's not going to get everything they want for sure. So this memo is a really good explanation of what Sarah just said. If you want to go back and refresh your memory out between now and then. Okay, I'm just again going down the way I can see people on the screen. So Tim Martell, any questions?
No. I would expect this line item to increase by 10 to 20% every year. It's such a big problem. And if the town decides that this is an area where the town wants to pay to address it, then, I mean, there's really no amount that's too much. This is a huge area. So I do think the town should consider what the town's philosophy on this needs to be. And it should be done in conjunction with the schools. That's it.
Judy,
Yeah, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, I'm in favor of it. I've heard about interface because I was married to a psychologist. My husband was a psychologist, and my daughter's a psychologist and speaks very highly of interface. And I think we should go for it.
Well, that's interesting that she knows what it is. That's,
Oh, yeah.
all right,
She knew
Jason.
immediately.
Jason?
So I also fully support that particular item. I think it makes a lot of sense for a lot of the reasons. I guess, I have 2 questions just thinking through both short-term and long-term on that particular item. It sounds like the renewal date is January 1, based on when we're going to contract using the community fund grant. So this additional amount that we see in the FY22 budget, when are we going to pay that, and what period of time does it cover? And is there a way to get it to sync with the fiscal years at all at any point in time here?
There is a possibility. I did have a conversation with our contact at Interface that it's not preferred for them, but that other communities have had the same issue where they've needed to sync up the contract with the fiscal year. we're incredibly grateful for the funds that the Southborough Community Fund gave us to be able to have this opportunity as soon as possible, because we have an urgent need now. So we recognize that it's not ideal timing, but we feel strongly that the services need to be available to residents, and that there should be as few barriers as possible to people getting help as soon as possible. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess just given, I guess what I'm trying to help you and advocate for is, you know, an 18-month contract, if they are amenable to that, right? Like maybe not for this year, but the next year, like get it locked in. And I mean, it just seems like they have a long history here. So it's not like you're buying an unknown commodity based on, sounds like the vetting you've done. So that would just be something to think about in the future. And then I guess my other question is, have you thought about how this impacts your future staffing at all? Does this, I know you had a plan and there's obviously no new FTEs presented in this budget, but does this potentially create savings or reduction of needs in the future with potential positions you had anticipated?
I wouldn't say that this particular item does. What I would say is that the addition of our administrative assistant that we've had this past year has a greater impact on that. We are in the process of using this year to cross-train our new administrative assistant on a lot of the programs that our program coordinator runs. So we kind of need to see how things shake out there. But as Mr. Martell pointed out, that you know, this is the sort of thing that there's never enough. And so we're actually also with some grant funds from the Southborough Community Fund working with a strategic planner to do a needs analysis of the community and develop a strategic plan as a result of that needs analysis to try to fine tune, you know, where we need to create, what are our boundaries here, because you know, there's just never going to be enough resources, and especially right now. So, I don't know that Interface changes our staffing very much, because now with our staff not working on the referral support, it means that they're able to dedicate the time that they should have been dedicating all along to the clinical services to people who are not getting their needs met elsewhere. So we'll have to see how things progress.
That's it, Kathy, for now. Thank you.
Andrew P.
E or D? I didn't hear you.
P.
All right.
P is in F.
I agree with Jason and Tim. I think it's certainly useful. The only thing in my research that I found that I wanted to bring you is in some towns like Westwood, for instance, they split the cost of Interface between the school and youth and family services. So I think that might be something interesting to do. And I think it makes a lot of sense because the certain schools are going to use it and the children, you know, there's going to be something there that it might make sense to split the cost.
Yeah. I do know that Greg Martineau is familiar with Interface. In fact, we had a grant last year that we had hoped to do a contract with Interface then, but because of the fiscal, it was a state contract which had more rules about how the money could be spent within a fiscal year. So we weren't able to do it, but in preparation for that, we had a conversation with Greg Martineau, and he was very interested. So it's been, unfortunately, a very challenging year for the schools and not been something we've been able to have a recent conversation about, but I do think that it's of interest to the school department.
So that is a reasonable thing to do. It doesn't change the bottom line, still gets paid for by the town, budget, but it probably does make sense for the school to at some point start sharing in it. All right, who is Andrew D?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, Sue, anything you want to say?
No, well said, Sarah. Well said.
Marguerite?
No, just thank you for your support on this. I'm very happy that it will hopefully materialize soon.
Sounds like you've got some pretty strong support here, if I gauge the committee correctly. So we will see. All right, ladies, thank you for staying out so late with us.
I appreciate it. I
Thank you
really
for your
appreciate it.
time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so Jason, can you bring in Chief Achilles? Hello, Chief.
Well, hello there, everybody.
There you are. There you are. Hello. All right, so this is another possible reserve fund transfer. Again, we're not going to vote on it. As we ask everyone to do is this year is to bring this to us ahead of time so we can discuss it and not just be handed something that was a fait accompli by the time we see it. And so far, so good. So Chief, with that, you want to explain to us what your problem is with the antennas?
Oh, this problem. Okay.
Yeah, this problem. Yeah, let's limit it to this problem tonight.
Okay. As you know, and I'll keep it simple, we have 2 radio antenna sites for emergency communications in the town. One is located at the end of Overlook Drive, and one is off Crystal Pond, as we refer to it, the EMC Tower. Last year, towards the end of the year, we used Harvard funds. Both the police and fire department split the cost of replacing the antennas. We were having an issue, and we found that it was better just to replace the antennas. So we purchased them. We had a company install them, and again, like I said, we split the cost. We took the money out of Harvard. Unfortunately, we started having issues with one of the antenna sites, specifically the police department's antenna. So we were significantly impacted by reduction in coverage for the emergency radio communication for the police department. That also coincided with a number of incidents that were high risk incidents with the PD and also us. So we were looking for immediate repair. The reason why these antennas failed was there was the design of the antennas were made, they're supposed to stand up like a regular antenna. There was a mistake in the ordering, and they were, the ones we purchased were ones that face down. Unfortunately, they have weep holes, and the weep holes were on the wrong end, and we got water and moisture in one of the antennas. So again, we had a failure.
Chief, quick question. Who installed them?
We had a company called Green Mountain. They climbed the towers and installed them. What we did is we have a radio communications coordinator with the fire department, and because antennas, we have a radio company that does part of the work, but they would sub out the work of installing the antennas. They don't do that. And we would also, they would go to a vendor and have these antennas made. And in an attempt to save some funds and cut out the middleman, we placed the order. I can tell you that it was an unfortunate mistake because it was 1 digit off between the 2 types of antennas. Unfortunately, we didn't have a lot of options once they started to fail, because they're not under warranty for the problem that occurred.
So Chief, there's no indemnity possibility for against the installer?
No, they installed what they were given.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for interrupting.
No.
Because ours, we ordered the wrong thing, and so they installed the wrong thing, but we ordered it.
Yeah, we ordered it, and we looked at some really quick fixes. We actually reached out to Northeast Regional Homeland Security Council for some fixes. We reached out to vendors. But it got to a critical mass where I made the decision that working with the police chief and the town administrator that we'd make an emergency purchase. We were fortunate that one of the companies had them in stock. Usually they take 4 to 6 weeks to get. And there was a cost associated with that. It could have been split between the police department and fire department. However it was going to happen, we were going to spend approximately $8,600 out of somebody's budget, either combined or one or the other. And I decided that to facilitate this and make it go faster, I would take it out of the radio communication repair budget line out of the fire department.
Which has $4,000 in it.
Correct. But I didn't want to put it in something that didn't match the need. And with the new processes in place and to make sure that advisory and the select board were aware of this, I think we started the process so that you were aware.
Okay, so in a nutshell, is this the only two that were ordered wrong? So it's not going to happen to other ones?
They were the two that were installed that were having a problem that need immediate need. I think we have a spare antenna that we can put up if we start to have a problem on the overlook site. If you ever drive by EMC, where EMC used to be, that really tall tower, we can't do the install. On overlook up near the water tower, we could do the install and change out the antenna if it had a problem. It hasn't had a problem yet. We have a reserve antenna on standby if that happens, and we will replace it. And we'll cover that within the budget.
Okay, but to be clear, did we order two wrong or more than two?
We ordered 3.
Okay, so there's a third one that could fail too for the same reason?
Right.
And that's on Overlook Drive?
Correct.
Okay. And you have now ordered 2 new ones. You've gotten them and they've been installed at
Sure.
EMC?
Yep.
So you're back in business?
Correct.
Chief, are there still areas in town that you have difficulty with transmissions?
That is correct. That's a bigger conversation. I think that, I think you'll see that in some of my budget narrative notes to the advisory. And I think we're meeting next week.
Yeah, because Chief, I know in my neighborhood, neither police nor fire can communicate with each other.
Right.
And I just don't know how widespread that is.
It's getting better, but there are gaps, and we continue to try to do low-hanging fruit repairs and improvements. I think that at some point it's going to end.
And are these 2 antennas which failed, are those, finger in the dike repairs, or are they part of our overall long-term?
They need to exist. They cover a large portion of the town, specifically the western part of and think of 85 West. It's really what it covers. And Overlook tries to cover the rest of the community. And that's probably the problem is we don't have enough coverage. We're getting better, and we're trying, like I said, we're trying to do the improvements. But you can have it's like your own, you can have $1,000 stereo system, but if you don't have a good antenna, you're not going to get your favorite radio station.
Kathy, sorry for interrupting.
That's okay. Good questions. So just to be clear, we're not sure this is going to be a reserve fund transfer request, but it might be, which is why Chief Achilles is here tonight. Right now, they've taken that line item negative, and we're just going to see how the rest of the year goes. If he's got other things where he's got surplus, they may decide to move it around within his budget rather than ask for reserve fund transfer. But it might be reserve fund at the end of the year.
Yep. That's it.
Andrew?
Kathy?
Well, just so understanding, so there's not a request now, but there might be one later. And in terms of like the numbers of it, what is it?
And we've asked people
8,600?
to let us know when it happens. Don't wait to the end of the year and come say, well, we did all this and give us reserve fund. So we've asked people to tell us as it happens.
Yes, that makes sense. So it's like what we're looking at now is 8,600 minus 4,000, so 4,600. Okay.
Well, we
Well,
still-
unless he may spend it on something else too. So you've already spent some of the 4,000, right?
Yeah, we still have to do regular radio repairs.
Yeah.
So the biggest, I think the better way to look at it is the highest liability is going to be $8,640, I think. It could be less, but as Kathy said, I think it was imperative that we made advisory aware now, not in May.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Oh,
Okay,
Jason, sorry.
Yeah, so two things. One, I haven't heard any dissent on this, right? So we're going to create like a tracker so that we know that there's a max 8,600 exposure on this item, so that over time, right, we obviously heard about one earlier today that will resolve itself one way or another sooner than the end of the year, because obviously those things aren't going to be absorbed in a budget like this May. But like, what's your intent for tracking these things so we know where we're at with our actually approved reserve fund budget?
So I started a reserve fund folder, which I'm going to transfer to OneDrive, that basically has anything in it that we know about the reserve fund for the year, including the memo that talked about this. So we've got that, and I'm going to I always keep a spreadsheet going. So I start out with the 180 that's in it. And then if we've actually, as we approve things, I might put that on there. This time I'm going to put potential, add a column for potential. And then, later on when we start doing approval, we'll move it over to approved. So there will be the ability for everyone to log on to their OneDrive folder or to the OneDrive folder and take a look at where we stand at any time with reserve fund.
Kathy, as I discussed with you, I need to sign off.
Okay, good luck.
Thanks.
And I guess my second question was for the chief. I know there was, I think it was 45K, chief, that was appropriated for the digital upgrade on the radio sites. Is that trending on budget, et cetera? Because that's obviously another area we could look to at the end of the year if that was under budget, but I don't know where you're at, chief.
We looked at that already. We actually have expended all of it except for a couple dollars. And that is been installed, and now the radios are being reprogrammed. So that we use that whole amount for that project between police and fire.
But you're not going to be, are you gonna be looking for more on that?
No.
Okay, all right.
We're staying within the budget.
All right. Thank you. I'm all set, Kathy.
Judy, Tim, anybody else?
I'm all set.
Tim?
I'm all set, thank you.
Andrew, did you ask your question?
I think Jason had my question with the 45K.
Okay. Did you know I answered your email today, Andrew? But it kept saying draft, even though it was in the sent items folder too. It was weird. So I don't know why it stayed draft. I sent it. So anyway, I did answer the question. Andrew D, did you ask a question? Do you want to ask a question?
I don't have any questions.
All right. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, guys. Enjoy your night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Okay, next, who's Mr. Butler? Let's bring in John Wood, Marika.
Jason the doorman.
All right, so Andrew D, you want to take over from this one as the liaison and kind of introduce them and get this kicked off?
Sure.
Hey, Marika.
Okay, so we have John and Marika here.
Thank you for having us.
So this should be pretty, the bottom line is that for EDC, the FY21 budget was 41,463. And the FY22 budget is 42,206. So it's an increase of $743 total. That's the only line item there's an increase. And so I think that's roughly like a 2%, somewhere between a 2 and 3% increase for the part-time salary of Marika, who I think works, was budgeted to work 19.5 hours. So it's pretty much kind of like a level funded budget. And there's two line items that take up 88% of the budget. One is the salary of the EDC coordinator. The other is there's a line item for $10,000 for contracted services, which I've spoken with John about it. He can explain what it's for. But guys, do you also want to just to provide an overview of what your mission is and what you've been doing recently?
So can everyone see the budget?
Yeah, sure. So this year's been kind of an interesting year for businesses and the EDC. Marika, just so you know, the $10,000 contracted services is the same as last year. We use that to go after grants, and if we don't use it, we put it back because I'd rather have it and not need it, because we can't earmark it for grants. We can't do anything like that, and it's too hard to come back for reserve fund transfer because it might be something we already know we want to go after. So last year, Marika and I, prior to COVID, we had been going out and looking into what we can do on Route 9, because right now on Route 9, we are at about a 23% vacancy rate, which is a little higher than the towns around us. Now with COVID, they're expecting the footprint of local companies in buildings to go down by 40 to 60%. So that's been kind of scary. We've been very fortunate, and this year I think EDC has secured almost $300,000 in grant money to help out small businesses. And so what we've done this year during COVID is we got during the Shared Streets grant, we were able to purchase 2 20 by 40 tents, a 10 by 20 tent for the local restaurants to use, where they were renting them for around $3,000 to $4,000 a month. So we were able to secure those. Then we got some heaters. Marika got a micro enterprise grant for, I think it was like around $200,000 that small businesses under 5 people could apply for, and they could get up to $10,000. I think 7 businesses so far have, Marika can correct me if I'm wrong, have been able to receive it. I know they changed the criteria for it because they were only looking at the 2020 business numbers of people. So you could have had a great year last year and you wouldn't be eligible for it, but you've made nothing this year because you can't go into, contract that couldn't go into homes for 6 months or do anything like that. So what's nice is it's rolling, so people can put in for it again as long as you don't apply and use it for the same thing. So somebody, if they used it for equipment one time, they could put in now for payroll, is how I believe it. So we've been reaching out to the banks and different things, trying to let all the smaller micro enterprise businesses know that that's there. So what we're doing this year is we want to really focus on trying to get businesses to stay in town, keep businesses in town, keep the businesses full on Route 9. So the contracted services, there's a bunch of grant money out there right now for last mile, for infrastructure problems, water, sewage problems along Route 9. That's been kind of the common thing for the businesses on Route 9 is water and sewage. So I think, Andrew P., you had said last time in the capital group thing, you were saying it'd be nice to see if we could use like some of these underused buildings for housing and such, as well as like a mixed use. I think that was you. I may be wrong. I'm sorry. But the problem is, I dug into that more. So the water and sewage problems on Route 9 that make it limited to put office buildings in or more office buildings in makes it even harder for those to be housing because they can barely support with that. So we're going to be working on the infrastructure problems on that. And I hope to have more information on that the year. Last mile, prior to COVID, a lot of the businesses were saying they were having a hard time attracting the reverse commuter from Boston because they couldn't get last mile transportation to take the train to Southborough and they wouldn't be able to go in. Hudson got a grant for $75,000 for a pilot program to have a bus take people from Southborough train station to their businesses. So I'd like to try to get doing that for next year. So that's what we've been doing and working on, and that's what we're looking forward to for the next year, as well as, we've been working on the downtown bylaw with the Board of Selectmen and planning, and that's been going very well. That's in a nutshell. Marika, do you want to chime in on anything?
No, I think you've covered it. I mean, if people want to hear more detail about certain things, but yeah, I guess our 3 main areas are the downtown initiative, I guess business outreach and business development. That's kind of how we categorize them. So there are a lot of things within those sections.
Alrighty. Okay, so let's talk about the budget specifically, then we can go back and talk about some other things. So I'm going to again start with who I see first. Tim Martell, you want to start with any questions on the proposed budget itself?
Kathy, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
I mean, basically, it's Marika, and then the contract services is pretty much their budget. A couple of small things. Okay. Right, John?
Historically, yeah, and historically, I just want to let you know, FY19, we returned $4,564 to the general fund that we didn't use. FY20, it's looking like it's about 10.5. This year, I don't know if it'll be as much because we've been using the contracted services money for anything that like the grants won't cover, like putting up the tents, taking down the tents. We used our contracted service to help the businesses out and things like that. So I don't know what we'll be able to put back as much, but we'll try. I'm not asking for money. I'm not going to use it to just use it to blow my budget to keep that. I want to just have it and not need it, instead of needing it and not having it.
So does everyone see where my cursor is? If you look again at the paperclip here, this is the letter we asked EDC to write to talk about what they would want to do if they could. And it sounds like if you read that if they could end up with more hours, they'd certainly take them.
Well, no, actually, I don't think Marika wants any more hours. I think she'd like to get paid for the one she's working. Marika does an awful lot for us. We're kind of shorthanded. We started as a 9-member committee, and then we didn't have enough. We kept having quorum problems, so I asked the selectmen. We dropped it down to 7. We have 6 members, and a bunch of our members have young children and jobs and trying to bounce between schooling and working and parenting and all that. So our bandwidth is pretty thin right now. But we're trying to get as much done as we can. So yeah. In a perfect world, I'd love to have Marika on full time. In a semi-perfect world, I'd love to have a couple more active members. If you guys know anybody, there's my sales pitch again. But that's about it.
Jason?
No questions. Thanks for the update and all your work on the grants in particular.
Judy?
No questions. Thank you.
Everybody here. Let's see, Andrew D probably has no questions, correct? Since you.
I don't have any questions, no.
John Johnson. Oh, Andrew Pfaff, sorry. I just can't see Andrew Pfaff.
No, not really any questions about the budget. I think it makes sense. And, John, I appreciate the turn back philosophy. I certainly appreciate that.
I spent a few years in you guys' seats, so I get it.
Yes, you did, didn't you?
It's a pet peeve of mine, and you hear more on that at some point.
Was John?
Andrew, I prepared him for your question. I told him to mention that he
yes, I love that. I love hearing that.
As John Wood well knows, there's no one that's been given a harder time from advisory than EDC historically.
Yeah.
The question was never the budget. The question was whether they should even exist. And there were definitely some very strong thoughts on advisory as far as that question goes. I think those that were in that camp, I actually see a couple of those in the audience, have either moved on to something else or are not part of advisory anymore. So the last couple of years have gone smooth, except last year, if you remember, I had a great issue with the proposed budget, John, but of course it did get ratcheted back when we did the 2% exercise to something much more reasonable. So, year over year, it's not bad. What is it, 1.79? So that's the first one we've seen so far that looks like inflation.
Yeah, the only increase is Marika's salary.
Okay. All right, so it sounds like we're done as far as questions on your budget.
So Kathy, I don't know, can I just jump in?
Of course.
Because when you say that, really, I get really riled up when people say, if they wonder if we need economic development.
Yeah.
I think it's so important to have a strong local economy. So we try to do with, whatever little people and hours we have, we try to do a lot of things. We try to inform people of businesses that we have. I think a lot of us don't even realize how many great businesses currently exist in Southborough or even started here and have grown. And it's so important to maintain or to create a relationship with these businesses and to keep them here and to make them want to grow in Southborough and not move out. we need to know why businesses move out or not, or decide, not to stay in Southborough, so we can actively act on that. The town has, I think, a problem, like a revenue problem. There's very, very little, area in town which is actually zoned for commercial activity. It's 9% to be precise. And we need to utilize that efficiently and utilize it for commercial purposes. So I feel very, very strongly about all those things. I could go on for a long time, but I think that's why I even put in there the town website should be more focused on marketing Southborough and informing not just residents but also businesses why Southborough is such a great place to be. So that's what.
So Marika, I appreciate your passion, always passion. That's great. So I can tell you what the argument was. It was hard for EDC back then, and still the case, to try to make a direct connection between the work that they did and providing an economic push in Southborough. So for example, a couple people commented that they're pretty sure that people don't make a decision as to whether to locate in Southborough based on the work of EDC. They're going to look at the rent, they're going to look at all kinds of things, and it's not going to have much to do with what EDC says or doesn't say. So that's where the push came back. I think John will remember, as far as it is hard to make a direct connection that EDC spending this money generated this much more money in tax revenue because of what we did. I am not in that camp. So I'm just letting you know that's what the argument was back then, but you're not hearing that anymore. So
well, thank you.
And then because one other thing is that we do economic development, but it's actually more than that. It's community development. Right now, we are spending a lot of time on zoning, on writing a zoning change, design guidelines. Even on Route 9, there are a lot of, I guess, bigger issues at play. I mean, we can go and visit companies and that won't make a lot of differences directly. That's why we need to work on last mile, because we visit those companies, we hear from those CEOs that, this Southborough is great, but we want to hire young people from Worcester and Boston, but they have a hard time because they don't have a car. They have a hard time reaching our offices from the commuter rail station. So we are working on that. So infrastructure is a thing, and zoning is a big issue even on Route 9. Especially now with the COVID, with the pandemic, we have to be flexible as a town to react. I mean, we have a lot of office buildings that are empty. We had a lot of offices that were empty. We have more now. We need to be flexible and see if they can be converted to mixed use or whatever other public uses would be beneficial. So again, I'm sure we'll be looking at that as well. So it's not just it's very broad. That's all I want to say.
Okay.
But there's some big issues.
And the ex-advisory members who were the most vociferous are in the audience and they're not raising their hands, so we're going to move on. All right, thank you guys.
Hey, one quick question, Kathy, for John is, I know you obviously would like more hours from Marika. Can any of the grants you have serve for that purpose? Is there a clause, that you could pay
for more hours?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
No, but what I have learned is just how much goes into managing a grant. After Marika and I have just Marika did the micro enterprise all by herself, and I've been helping her with just some of the shared streets. It's an amazing amount of work that goes into the reporting and actually implementing the grant. So that's what now I think next year I'll lean more towards going out to bid with companies to go after the grants, and then because what they want to do is they want to manage the grant afterwards. And then what's nice is their administrative fees can come out of the grant, which will be helpful. As a trial by fire, live and learn, kind of thing on this one. But there's a lot more work into running a grant than I thought there was, and Marika's done an amazing job.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, John, keep up the good work. If we hear people that we think,
thank you. That was going to be my next pitch, and I know where you're going.
John, speaking about the buses, it sounds like you might want to join that MWRTA
Marty already asked, and no, I don't. I'm on 4 committees and another board out of this. So, but maybe I thought about it until I saw the Board of Selectmen meeting that he said he guessed it was him. So I thought, haha, I'm out of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would like to. I'll probably go to a bunch of those because right now there is a ton of money for last mile. There's a lot of grant money out there. And I know you guys are doing a great job and I respect everything you're doing, but the town really should go after more grants. As a whole.
We
focus
actually did talk about, we're trying to figure out a way to make sure that we don't miss grants that are obvious for sure. We know we have 2 or 3 last year. So we hear you.
So we've been, what I did notice, given, I'm sorry to keep talking, but we started sending out a newsletter to all the boards and committees just to tell what we're doing. And what was nice is somebody else another committee after that, put out other grant opportunities that were out there. So it's nice to know and collaborate with other boards and committees so everybody can know what's out there. So if we find an opportunity that we think fits somebody else, we've reached out to Trails, we've reached out to other committees to say, hey, this might benefit you. And it hopefully, like Marika said, it's more of a community development than just economic. Again, I've said this for years. I think Southborough has more of a revenue problem than a spending problem, and it's only going to get worse. As you guys know.
That's a fact. We don't have any room to grow. That's a fact.
So we got to think outside of the box and try to figure out what we can do to compete against these other towns.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Anything else?
Good night.
Good night.
Thank
you.
Okay, so let's go back to the agenda. So let's do the minutes from last week. Andrew, you want to take it from here?
Sure. So I circulated last evening the draft of the November 18th minutes, which are in very good shape. Thank you, Claire. I know I noticed one edit that I'd like to make. If Claire, you're ready. On line 117 and 118, we were talking about the changes to the advisory bylaw, and it said I favored lower quorum in light of section 9.9, and then Andrew Pfaff, Judy, and John also favor 7 as a quorum. I think quorum should be changed to size of board. I think what we were saying is we agreed with changing the size of the board from 9.
Size of committee.
Pardon me? Oh, that's right.
The
As a committee. Size of committee.
All right. I've got a small one. I thought these minutes were well written. Truly enjoyed reading them, which sounds a little weird. Okay, so line 43, nothing but a little nit here. So Mr. Laflamme, Mr. Flame thinks it is a difference. You just need to add the word it, Claire, between thinks and is. Thinks it is a difference. That's my contribution.
I had a question. I don't know that I have an answer for it, but obviously, Kathy, you keep screenshotting ClearGov, right? And that's a budget that technically exists as a document. I know there was a reference in the minutes to like that at that point, there was a screenshot of ClearGov. I just don't know what our requirement is to actually reference and attach that to the minutes. Like when you have the budgets up there.
I hope we don't have to do that. We're going to talk in a minute about the overall budget in the spreadsheet. So, and we're going to keep updating that. So Andrew, can you check with Jim Haggerty and see what he thinks? I hope we don't have to do that.
Can't we just reference the video in the minutes?
It's too bad we can't do that. I don't think we can, but it's.
I don't know if we can, because I don't know if they save them in that fashion, but we could just, Kathy, save off a copy of ClearGov.
Yeah. So I can say just from practical,
You mean
like
save a copy of the whole thing?
Can I just say something that now that I've been the secretary, one reason why I would like to have less attachments more than more if we can is because also the town clerk's office requires this to come in
as a PDF
form, and they're all separate PDFs, And I don't personally, I think, have a PDF maker. So I'm doing this thing where I'm getting these documents, forwarding them from like between my Southborough email, my personal email, and I'm using my work PDF maker to PDF all this stuff. So that takes like half an hour of work each time to take all these documents.
I completely understand the level
So
of
I don't want to
effort
have to do it
given
if I don't have to.
the other minutes I have to submit. I'm just also trying to comply with open meeting law, which
All right, so it's a good
Yeah, I
question.
understand.
So
I'll
let's
talk
check,
to Jim.
let's ask the question, and maybe what we can do is if each set of minutes to say, refer to, no, see, they can't get to one. So OneDrive is for us. It's not for the town. It's not open to everyone. It's open to us. So that's not a good answer. So just ask him what he thinks, that we want to avoid attaching a new budget every single, I mean, we'd have to do this every single minutes from this point on.
We didn't do that before, right?
No.
they started it's always been an open meeting law. They started enforcing on some date the actual attachments. You used to just be able to reference them and be done, but now they actually, at some point, Jim put a cutoff and actually started asking for the attachments.
Yeah, so just let him know, of course, we're talking about the budget every single time. It changes a little bit from meeting to meeting. Can we legally, without any trouble, not attach something every single meeting about the budget? And I'm not quite sure what we would attach from ClearGov. I guess we could.
There's probably have to be a download function, or someone would have to take a screenshot or something.
I just sent Andrew, you, and Kathy a PDF version of ClearGov from today.
Oh,
I
great.
just exported it as Excel, and
The two budgets we looked at.
the whole thing. So all the data.
Okay.
So Andrew, will you check before we do this?
Yes, and I would like to. I was trying to figure that out on Clearview too. So then, actually,
So
I'll
it's like
try
a
to connect
report.
with you, Andrew. So you
Yeah,
can-
there's a report builder. You just export it to Excel, and then I just printed it or saved it as a PDF from Excel.
The whole thing.
Thank you.
22 pages in really small font.
Okay.
But
no one could argue when trying to comply.
Yeah, I just think that there needs to be a place where people can go and look at the budget. It's being built. I agree with that, but not attached to the minutes. So there just should be a place, website.
From the webpage of Clearview, I thought it was saying like, there was a way that a member of the public could get access if they wanted to.
they should be able to.
All right, so let's talk to Jim, see what he says, and then we'll figure out a way to get the actual budget as it's being built, where it should be on the town website, so people can see it as it's being built, which they should have access to, but not having to attach this every single time to a minute. Okay. Anybody else have any changes or comments on the minutes from last week?
I'm good.
Again, beautiful job, Claire. All right, so motion to approve as amended.
So moved.
Second.
That was Jason, and who said Andrew Fast seconded? Okay, roll call. Judy,
Yeah, Bud's eye.
Cook, aye. Andrew D,
Dennington, aye.
Jason,
Malinowski, aye.
Martell,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
6-0. All right, chairman's update. So the OneDrive folder is set up. Everybody should have gotten an email from Tom on November 25th that lets you log in to see it, and then you can just save it as far as where it is. So you can go right to it, save it as favorite, save it on your toolbar. Now, I'm the only one that can write to it. You guys can read. And I didn't set it up though. That's just how he set it up. I didn't ask him to do that. So everything that is important to the budget process this year is being uploaded to it. So there's going to be different folders within the folder. So everything you need should be there when you need to go back and refer to something. Now, the minutes aren't going to be there because you know how to get to those on the town website. So things that are someplace else won't be there, but things that are really our documents that we're working on that we need to go back and refer to will be there. Okay. So did anyone try to go into the folder? Did everyone?
I did.
Did you get, so you got the email?
Yeah, because you had asked me to upload the capital stuff. I don't have the ability to upload anything.
No, that's what I said. I didn't set it up that way, Jason. That's just not how I set it up. So I don't fix that because there's no reason that everybody can't upload something.
Yeah. So I think Brian should be able to do it because it's sitting on his actual, that's how it worked for capital. So.
All right, but I'm still going to open it up so that everybody on advisory can upload documents. I want to be the one uploading documents. So I want you guys to upload your own documents. All right, so everybody should take a look at that, make sure you can get into it, and just know that that's going to be the repository for all of our documents. The warrant's going to close 12:15. There's Mark's already got the placeholder in there for the advisory bylaw changes, so we're fine there. We're not going to talk about that tonight because we're going to run out of time. So next time, I hope we'll have it ready for everybody to look at and say we like it, and then let the board start to do it.
And Kathy, sorry, before moving off of that, so because that would be like our last opportunity to look at this, approve it, and get on the warrant, and it's
No, the placeholder's there.
Okay.
So it's there, so we're fine. But we might as well just get this out of our way, right?
Yeah, I was just suggesting that from our last discussion, we really got into the language, and that's really important. I just think the clearest way of expressing it is for the next draft to have a red line against the existing bylaw.
All right, so we will. So you'll see the red line in the OneDrive folder. Okay, so make everybody go look at it, right? So it will be there the next couple of days. I'll send you an email and tell you it's there to take a look at it. And then we should actually vote on it on the 9th, and we're done. And move it on to Board of Selectmen. Okay, because they're going to sponsor it. All right, and I got a fresh memory. Did I let you know that I have talked to John Butler and I've talked to Al Hamilton by email as far as the background? Did I relay that discussion to you guys?
But John is raising his hand, just FYI.
All right, so why don't you bring him in?
John is in. He's on mute.
So John, can you unmute so we can talk to you and talk to us?
Unmute. Yeah, so I was here because slightly accidentally, but it was Kathy had emailed me about the history of the amendment that happened in 2008. And I think she had just asked a pertinent question, which was, I don't know, did the content of my reply to you, I replied twice to you, Kathy, about in your emails, did that get communicated to the members?
No, so I was about to, so why don't you communicate to the members directly? So let us know what you said.
Okay, so someone found that it was a little stretch in my memory at first, but then Kathy dug up from the library the particular change that was made, and the motivation for the change was that advisory members were in effect being recruited by spending departments and others to basically participate in some way in their ongoing deliberations, so that, and be members of various committees, so that they would then in effect advocate for them when their budgets came before advisory. And that was, we felt after several, after quite a few years of experiencing that was a problem. The bylaw as it stood before we amended it merely restricted who could be appointed to advisory, but didn't restrict what advisory members could join after they were appointed. And that was where the problem arose. So we sought to change that by making the amendment. Now, I think that the limitation with respect to standing committees, by allowing, the language was permissive with respect to ad hoc committees under the circumstances that were listed in the amendment, approval by the advisory committee and abstention, in effect, abstention by the member from discussion. The ad hoc limitation was, I believe, a simple catch-all to prevent advisory members from being members of the Board of Selectmen or the school committee or one of the huge spending organizations, because it was deemed that there was no way that that could possibly be appropriate. I still think that that couldn't possibly be appropriate, but I think if more narrowly, you wanted people to be able to be on capital planning, and if capital planning switched to being a standing committee. I mean, I don't see any problem with that. That certainly used to be a standard feature. I mean, there was a standing capital planning committee years ago. It was abolished and has been brought back as an ad hoc. I think that that certainly makes sense. If that's really all you want, I mean, so if there's agreement that certain major spending committees like the Board of Selectmen or the school committee advisory members should never be a member of, but that capital planning might be an exception if it became a standing committee, then maybe one wants to simply make that exception explicit. I mean, that would be the narrowest way of changing the bylaw to just permit membership in capital planning. Otherwise, I think you have to be careful to cast the net correctly, assuming that you agree that it doesn't make any sense to have an independent advisory committee that's also a member of the Board of Selectmen or the school committee. I don't see that was ever the intent of the town structure. Essentially, the town structure being that there's a legislature and the advisory committee is the legislature, that is the town meeting's only standing committee. I mean, legislatures generally have committees, and a lot of work goes on in committees. It happens that the town has historically had one standing committee, and that's the advisory committee, but it's part of the legislative part of the town. And so that's basically the structure. And I think if you want to stick with that, you don't want people also being part of the executive, but that's my view.
So John, I think the intent is not to limit it to capital planning because, as you recall, in the past, advisory members have been on various ad hoc committees. The road committee, Brian Shea was on that one. The town manager committee, Brian was on that one. John Wood has been on a couple ad hocs. So I don't think we want to limit it just to capital planning. Maybe capital planning as the only standing committee.
That's what I would have meant,
okay.
Yes.
Right, okay. Because there are ad hoc committees that I think we want to be able to.
I presumed you were going to leave the ad hoc language alone. That is, leave it alone with respect to its permissiveness, but that you might expand the permission to include some, to grant permission for some scope of standing committees, and the least expansive version of allowing some standing committees would be to name one committee, one standing committee, namely the capital planning committee. That at least makes it clear that you can't be a member of the Board of Selectmen or the school committee and be on the advisory committee. I don't know whether that's what you want to do, but it would seem to me you leave the permission and the methodology of joining an ad hoc committee in place, and you want to expand it to allow specifically capital planning. And the question is, do you need to write it generically, write it using generic language to allow some other standing committees, while, if you agree with my point of view, prohibiting membership on some of the big spending committees? So I don't know. That's just my input on it.
I think the one question, John, is if, I'm reading it right here, but if we remove the ad hoc, right, from the line, it would be an advisory committee member may belong to one committee that is appointed by an elected board official or one other committee appointed by the moderator. So isn't the selectmen and school committee and those ones are all elected by the voting population, not appointed, right?
Well, the best way to do this first is to decide what your objective is, and then to try to draft something and everybody look at language. It's sort of hard to do it. It's somewhat hard to do it just verbally, but because you have two pieces here. There's the language in the opening paragraph, and I kind of don't want to try to get into drafting here because it's based on what I just said, but the language in the opening paragraph talks about who may be appointed. So if you're a member of the Board of Selectmen, you can't be appointed to the advisory committee. Then there's the question of, if you're on the advisory committee, can you run for the Board of Selectmen? Should that be prohibited? while remaining on the advisory committee. As it stands right now, that would be prohibited, as would being on any standing committee be prohibited. So the first thing to decide is if you want to open it up to some standing committees, of which capital planning is one, are there other standing committees that you want to capture as being permissible? Do you want to permit them in such a way that a person who is a member of the standing committee already can be appointed to advisory, or only that if they're on advisory, they can subsequently join a standing committee? Because you have two parts to this. The way this is written, it talks about who the moderator may appoint, who may join a committee afterwards. So you have to deal with both of those. And all I'm suggesting is the first thing that your committee should decide is, what do we want? If this is too restrictive in its present form, what specifically do we want to allow? And then try to reduce that to language that works in all the conditions you have to deal with in this text.
All right, you're right. We didn't talk about the reverse where you're already on a standing committee and now Paul wants to, or moderator wants to appoint you to advisory. We didn't talk about going that way. And you're right. The impetus for doing this, or the background, is Marty Healy would like to see capital planning become a standing committee because Boris Lightman is very happy with that committee as far as the work it's doing. So they like for it to be a standing committee, which makes sense. So that's why. So this was a healthy discussion. There's nothing insidious about what we're trying to do here.
Oh, of course.
It so happens that 3 of the people on the capital planning committee are on advisory. So if we don't change this, then the chair and am I the vice chair, Jason? I guess the vice chair and a third person who are kind of the meat of that committee would have to get off of it.
Well, my suggestion, frankly, would be, unless you have other objectives beyond what you just described, would be to write a piece of text that specifically creates an exception for the capital planning committee as a standing committee, and just says you can be on capital planning as a standing committee and be appointed to advisory, or you could be on advisory and be appointed to capital planning. And by the way, I think that makes sense because capital planning, in effect, in the end, makes a report, or traditionally has made a report to town meeting about appropriation. So I think that makes sense. My suggestion would be to write that out, to create that as an exception to the current language. I think it's the minimal, it gets you involved in the fewest other potential hangups. It would be to draft it that way.
All right, so good advice. And I can't think of any other standing committee that we would want advisory to be on. But remember, there's already still a couple safeguards. Advisory's got to approve someone being on another committee by majority vote. And of course, that person's got to get appointed by someone. So whoever appoints them also has, a check and balance on putting their person on a committee that shouldn't be on a committee.
Well, if you're going to, right now, standing committees are not permitted at all. So the other checks and balances would have to be defined by whatever language you drafted that would permit a particular standing committee. I mean, it might be that you would include those two characteristics in the requirements for appointing someone to a standing committee, but you don't have to.
The other thing too that we're thinking about changing is the language that says that the advisory committee member has to basically abstain and can't even be part of a quorum at a meeting where the other committee business is in front of advisory. And before you think that that's still a good idea. So for example, capital planning. We have tentatively approved the capital plan for fiscal year 22. However, we've got a year-over-year increase in our fiscal year 22 budget right now that's way too high. We've got to bring it down. So I don't want to preclude the people on capital planning from basically changing their mind at advisory if we've got to cut something that we previously approved. I like the idea of not being able to weigh in on advisory when capital planning is being looked at.
Well, so the language was never intended. I believe at the time that the language was drafted, capital planning, we did have a capital budget committee.
You did, because
it was never intended to adopt the point of view that capital budget members couldn't participate that is the liaison to capital budget, because it was always the view that a budget of a department was not that a capital budget of a department was the department's budget and not the capital planning, not the capital budgets committee's budget. So it was, that was, if you think that it would be necessary to clarify that capital budget members ought to be able to participate in discussions of the capital budget for particular departments, then I think you should clarify that, because it certainly makes sense that they should be able to. They're not, it's not like, it's not, so the contrast, let's say, is, let's suppose that, I don't remember offhand whether Public Works Planning is an ad hoc or a standing committee. I don't know which it is, but standing. Okay, so Public Works, if it comes in and advocates for some money for something for Public Works, if a member was a liaison, let's say was ad hoc or was permitted, then that's a case where it makes sense to not have that person participate. But capital budget is an omnibus review committee designed to focus on a particular part of the budgetary process and ought to be able to participate in the discussions of advisory if there are members of advisory as well as capital budget. That seems fine, but it's not a vertical committee that focuses on the police department, the DPW, or one of those other, or the library, or one of those other things. So, I think that's a reasonable distinction to be sure that you've covered in whatever text you create.
All right. I thought you might join us when we were talking about EDC.
No, it's water under the dam.
All right. Anybody else have any other questions for John? So we will keep you posted so that you will support this at town meeting when it comes up to.
Well, just I'd be happy. I offered to look at the text if you want.
I know. We'll let you
You want
look at
another
the text.
pair of eyeballs at it? I'd be happy to look at the text. All right.
Kathy, the only thing is, and I think Jason brought this up, is if we're going to focus right on capital planning, do we do that exception in the capital planning committee, whatever charter or whatever it gets written, that's where the exception sits to this rule? Or do we put that in?
No, it really has to be an advisory bylaw.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, John.
Sure. Good night.
Good night. All right, so I will make sure that a red line version gets uploaded to OneDrive in the next few days, and then we will we'll pick it back up next week. We hope that we will finish our work on it and move it on. Okay, fiscal year 22, well, fiscal year 21 budget. So the House.
Hey, Kathy.
Yes.
You skipped number 4.
I'm still on chairman update.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were going down the fiscal. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Well, I brought him in, Jason, because I was talking about it, and there he was, and I knew that's why he was here tonight. So I did skip down to bring that back up to this, but this was in my chair update too. Okay, so I'm back on chair update. The House has passed a $46 billion budget, which it's a little bit more money than what Baker's budget was. The Senate's expected to basically follow suit. So we shouldn't have an issue with money that we've already budgeted or estimated for fiscal year 21 going down. Fiscal year 22 still to be determined. Let's see. So Carol Ostrich, we spent a lot of time talking about personnel at the townhouse last year in our budget discussions. Remember that Brian Ballantyne wanted to add a half a person to his staff. So Carol Ostrich, who is was the administrator in the town hall, has retired now effective November 30th. So that position is totally open. So to Mark Purple's credit, he is taking a look at what we referred to earlier tonight, the admin positions, and he is looking at shuffling people around to possibly not have to refill that position. He's bringing Katie Berry over to the townhouse to help out for what she does at the ZBA. So they are looking at this and being, I think, starting to be creative as far as trying to look at what we can do with who we have and not necessarily fill in this open position. They may propose to use some of this for Brian, but they're not there yet. So we don't really know what they're going to propose in final form for fiscal year 22 for treasurer, board of selectmen, et cetera. So we're probably gonna look at those guys last. We really think that they've got this sorted out what they want to do. All right, so that's all I got from my chair update. Jason, I sent you, which you probably know already, the list of articles that we voted on, so you can see where our votes were in case you want to reopen any of those. So I'm going to leave that to you to say. I'd like to go back and discuss the ones that we voted on from last year.
So, is there some highlighting in which ones actually went forward to town meeting? Like, I think some of these went forward, and I just looked at it very quickly before the meeting.
Hardly.
What are you saying? So you think these are all items that would come back up again?
They are coming back. They got carried over, so it's not like you had to refile. They just got carried over. So yeah, they're definitely, no one's withdrawn them. So
Like the one that caught my eye, Kathy, was Article 5. I'm pretty sure I remember Betsy Rosenblum up there.
Oh yeah,
presenting it.
SAP you have to do. So they did the ones they had to. So yes, SAP was done.
Right. So that's what I'm just trying to figure out, is which one of these lists that I need to weigh in on.
So I will text you after we get out of this meeting and tell you which ones that are being carried over that you should take a look at.
Okay.
Now, we did not officially vote on the St. Mark's Church request for CPC, but we clearly were going to vote against it. So unless someone's changed their mind, that was not going to pass advisory. We were trying to give everybody all chances to come in and talk to us, and they just came in after the deadline there. So, but there definitely was not a majority vote for that one at that time. So that one we should look at again because we didn't officially vote on it.
Yeah, so I'm ready to vote on all the others.
All right, so that's good. All right, let's go back to the agenda. Let's see that one. All right, so let me do real quick where we stand with fiscal year 22 budget, and then Jason will turn it over to you as far as the sick pay, vacation pay issue. Let me just share screen one more time. I'm not real good at this. I don't know why I have to keep clicking on it. I do. Okay. Everybody see the spreadsheet we're used to? Yeah?
It's a little bit small,
All right.
but yes, I see it. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to go to the main spreadsheet we're used to. So right now, can everybody see my cursor? See the plus sign there? Yes?
Yes.
Yes, Tim says yes, Andrew says yes. Okay, so right now, unadulterated, we've got a 7.8% year-over-year tax increase to the average house, which basically means to everybody. So it's got to come down, but you know something, it started off higher in the past, so I don't actually think it's too bad of a place to just start out. So we definitely have to do. Something's going to have to get cut out of it, but that's where we are right now with everybody's budget as requested. And just to be clear, the Board of Health, I mean, it's a huge increase. It's from 171, I believe, to like 394. So they're asking for, you know, more than double.
Kathy,
Yes.
is it still, you had a general rule of thumb that every $100,000 is a 1% increase?
Quarter point.
A quarter point.
400,000 is 1%.
Okay.
Right. All right, so I just wanted, I'm not going to talk, I mean, that's where we are right now with everybody's budget in as what they've requested without pushing back at this point.
So Kathy, why doesn't this match ClearGov?
You know, I don't know, Andrew. I tried to go in and figure the differences. So you're right, it doesn't. So if you look at the bottom line, it's about $1 million off. So I don't know. So
Capital.
Excuse me?
Capital.
Capital may be perfect. Oh, well, okay, capital may not be. The
Capital's not in
debt-
ClearGov yet.
Okay,
Brian
capital,
didn't enter.
the capital is in here, right? It's in the spreadsheet, right?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, so I didn't look at the difference. I just eyeballed it. It's $1 million something, so that would make sense because capital is $1.7 million. But I will reconcile it before we look at it next week. So every Wednesday, I get another updated version of this. So I will keep uploading these to OneDrive as they come in. All right.
Yeah, but I mean, it just confuses me. The whole point of ClearGov was to just be using ClearGov and not the spreadsheet anymore.
Yeah, but the ClearGov doesn't give us a tax increase. That's the problem here. It doesn't give us a tax increase and what we're looking at in the little box here. So you don't have to pay any attention to this if you don't want to, other than it's still to me, I guess I'm just so used to it. Old dogs, new tricks, right? I still like at least looking at the overall spreadsheet here. So if you don't want to look at it, you don't have to, but you're not going to see the impact on taxes in ClearGov.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. But I mean, revenue is 54 million in ClearGov and it's 60 in here, 61. I mean, it's not even close.
Well, remember how CPA funds work? That's part of the problem. So I don't know what else he's left out of that. So I don't know. So I'll get it.
But to Andrew's point, though, I think even if the feature doesn't exist now, like we should have Brian bubble it up to our ClearGov rep, because I can't imagine this is the only town. They maybe don't look at exactly like we're looking at it, but it seems like a pretty basic feature that they could probably code pretty quickly.
If you're going to do town governmental software, I agree. Budget software. So I agree. So I'm happy to. We can start a list of things that we think they should improve. So it sounds like that they are trying to make it better. Yeah, I actually think, for $24,000 or whatever it is, that they should be improving things. That's actually to me a lot of money year over year for software. All right. Okay, so that's all I want to say about where we are at this moment. Jason, you want to talk about the issue with the accrual, vacation, and sick pay?
Yeah, and just because I think most of you got stuck in the attendee option, I did some research too on why everyone got stuck in attendee as opposed to panelist. This meeting wasn't actually set up for tonight in Zoom, but because we all use the old link. So I talked to Tim Davis, who's now handling the IT during our meetings. So you should all be getting links going forward. So I just want to throw that out there before I forget when we're running off at the end of the meeting.
I guess I didn't understand that. So when so to set up a meeting, you go to the calendar, you find a room, you set it up, right? And then I'm done, or we're done at that point. And then I didn't realize what went on behind the scenes. So then someone takes it from there and makes it a Zoom meeting.
Yes. All they do is it's the same link. So just for everyone's benefit, it's the same link every week, and they just add the dates in. And the tonight's date, for example, wasn't added in, but when we open the meeting, we actually open up next week's meeting. So Tim's going to make sure we're all set for next week, Kathy, I guess is the point.
See, that makes more sense because whatever we said at the first, which is because of a recurring meeting, it's not a recurring meeting. I didn't set it up as a recurring meeting. I set up each one individually. So that makes more sense, Jason.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry. So I knew I would forget that at the end. So on the letters to the BOS and Personnel Board is meeting next week on this topic. It's on the agenda. It's on Wednesday at 12 noon. I would say that behind the scenes, there's been a lot of progress on trying to reconcile schedules, et cetera. Where I anticipate that conversation going is, at least what I've learned from the process as I've looked at the data and trying to understand why a lot of it didn't make sense, is we have a very, very manual process. So there may be some undertakings that the Personnel Board may be able to do through the SAP to rectify some of that, to make it easier to administer, to make it just as friendly to the employee, and not create, I'll call it, the issues that we have seen this year with some massive fluxes and balances and confusion over what true balances actually are. So I don't want to speak for those involved, but I think everyone is finding it a worthwhile exercise and is cooperating on the SAP side. There's also the fire side, which I'm happy to report the data looks a heck of a lot more online as of today. It looks nothing like the original data that led to some of our discussions. What I don't have an answer for is what happened since the inquiry was raised to get to the schedule today. But what I can also tell you is this definitely has the attention of Mark and the chief. My intention on both, because obviously the union type items or BOS, which Mr. Healy has not wanted to add this to an agenda, versus the SAP is obviously under personnel board, is to kind of come back with, final findings to advisory. After we've kind of had some preliminary discussions with personnel board of what they're willing to do, et cetera, and just decide whether we've done our job or not. But I'll tell you, I think it's opened some people's eyes to processes, accuracy of data. But I'm happy to report there's full cooperation and focus on it. But I don't have the full story yet, so I don't want to hypothesize on where it'll all end.
So Jason, let me ask you a basic question. When a person in Southport, Wilshire Southport, gets their paycheck stub, can they see on that stub what their accrued vacation is?
Yes.
Accrued sick time, so it does show it?
Yes.
Okay, and then it's up to whoever processes the payroll to basically, if someone's used vacation or used sick time, to record it so that it uses some of it and shows it as a deduction.
Correct.
But Jason, does that just do current year or rolling tally?
Oh, well, everyone's different depending on whether you're a department head, an SAP employee, or a union employee, and what your contract says of rollover provisions.
Payroll reports it differently based on that status?
Well, they have to because it's contractually obligated. The biggest thing that I have uncovered thus far, that again, I'm very happy that, from a controls perspective for anyone in the accounting world, is I did learn that the fire union was maintaining the vacation balances. But there's been a process and put in place. Chief Achilles asked for it, I think, pretty early on in his tenure here. That's being moved up to the townhouse where everything else is maintained.
So when you say maintained, the fire department doesn't process their own payroll. That's still done by the townhouse. And so the townhouse payroll person would rely on the fire department person to let her know what vacation was being used, what sick pay was, or what sick time was being used. That's how it worked.
Yes, and that's what ultimately ended up on employee A or B's paycheck.
Is that all you want to say for tonight? Wait for SAP to meet.
Yeah, that's all I had, unless anyone has any questions or further directions that they want from advisory.
Anybody? Are you awake, Judy?
Barely.
Okay, we're almost done. All righty, let's see. I think we're done. Nothing to report tonight on the CPC subcommittee. Soon though, soon. Review a calendar for future meetings. So we've got the next 2 weeks in December, the 9th, we're going to see fire, police, and facilities next week. We're going to do facilities first, Jason, because John Parent's got to get off the meeting pretty quick. So I tell him we do his first. And then we've got the 16th, and we're doing the library. And I forget who the second one is. So
DPW.
16th, DPW. Okay, good. And then we've got the every Wednesday in January scheduled so far, if we need them, which I'm pretty sure we will. I still believe that the town meeting is going to be pushed back, but no one wants to say it because they're afraid that people will not feel the pressure. So they want everybody to keep pushing as if it's going to happen in March. But I think that the conventional wisdom is it will not happen in March. All right. Anything else anybody wants to talk about?
So Kathy, I just want to go back to something you talked about before where you were talking with Jason about, the non-budget articles. And I don't know what the procedure is if we're going to be like carrying over our votes from last year about these, but is that what you were thinking, or are we going to discuss them again?
I think we need to run through them and just kind of refresh your memory as to how we voted. They weren't all unanimous. I've got the votes still recorded. So I think we should just run through them, but I'm not sure we need to have the people back in, for example.
I've just given some further thought due to things that have happened since last March about the planning board article.
Yep.
Right, that I would like to talk to about it.
Well, that one, if you're talking about the lighting illumination.
No, not the one that was about lighting. It was about the organization of the planning board, and my concern was about the deletion of the constructive approval part of site plan review.
Okay, so we'll go back to anything anybody wants to. And some I think are pretty cut and dry, and then we'll look at what we should look at. All right. Anything else? Anybody still left in our public? Any public comments? Okay, not seeing any. Can we have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
I second.
Roll call. Judy.
Yes.
Cook, aye. Andrew Dennington.
Aye.
Jason.
Aye.
Tim Martell.
Aye.
Andrew Pfaff.
Aye.
6-0. Good night, everyone.
Night.